Fire Emblem Awakening, the entry heralded as the savior of the Fire Emblem series. This game was my entry point into the fantastic world that is Fire Emblem. And I'm sure it was the same case for a lot of you watching. As a young, impressionable 13-year-old, the experience Awakening provided was nothing short of unique and opened my eyes to an unfamiliar genre of game known as tactical RPGs. However, the more games in the series I began to play after Awakening, the more I grew to resent it. Games like Genealogy of the Holy War showcased how enthralling political drama can actually be when given the proper amount of setup and world building. Games like Radiant Dawn showcased how the series could provide unique challenges by giving you entirely different armies every couple of chapters to micromanage. Hell, even Awakening's successor, Fire Emblem Fates, which was mired in controversy, came out more beloved for tighter game mechanics and more rewarding map design. It just seemed as if Awakening existed outside of what I perceived to be Fire Emblem. And at a point, I just dismissed the game entirely. But for no reason in particular, I decided I would give Awakening another shot. This was the beginning, after all, not only for me, but the trajectory of where Fire Emblem has been headed for the past 13 years. So I dusted off my 3DS, created a brand new save, and prepared myself to reevaluate my stance on Awakening. Because maybe that spark which hooked me initially could reignite into a new appreciation for the game that started it all.
Pick a god and pray.
Our journey begins in the Halidom of Elise. A blue-haired prince by the name of Crom helps us up to our feet after realizing we found ourselves lost in a strange and foreign land. Accompanied by his sister, Lissa, and knight Frederick, the three quickly adopt us into their militia known as the Shepherds. Consequently, tensions rise as their neighboring kingdom of Plegia prod and provoke Elise into a full-scale war. An ambitious conqueror mounts for a continent-wide crusade, and a fanatic cult operates in the shadows, hoping to revive their fallen deity. Revisiting Awakening's story after a decade definitely made me feel nostalgic. It's not a great narrative by any stretch of the imagination. Honestly, I would call it bad if I were to be completely blunt, but it does do its job of getting us the player from one map to the next. The pacing can be odd at times, but I did respect how ambitious they were attempting to fit 3 different scenarios in one game. Usually a Fire Emblem game only covers the events of a single war, culminating in us witnessing the crowning of our protagonist. But here we get to see the ascension of a king and how he employs his newfound power. It's kind of like watching seasons of an anime, 2-year time skip and all. That's probably why younger me ate this game up. Awakening is a lot more laid back and approachable compared to its predecessors. Not to mention the enticing anime aesthetic.
What are you doing?
You're not thrown straight into political turmoil, there is no lengthy exposition. You get to make a customizable character, become fast friends with a colorful cast, and look badass with tons of visual flair during combat. All the while, the political state and world building of the game is slowly drip-fed to you. Or in some cases, isn't at all. The presentation of Awakening is what has set it apart from any other game preceding it. For the time, the game looked, and still does look, amazing. Everyone likes to poke fun at the fact that 3D models have this strange, stumpy foot appearance to them. But besides that, the backgrounds are varied, the 2D art is gorgeous, and the effects during combat add a sense of weight to the animations. To this day, I don't think any game is going to outdo the critical cut-ins of Awakening. Playing this on original hardware, I also had the opportunity to try the 3D mode, something I just never interacted with before, and I would urge you to do the same if possible. You get to appreciate the still art during cutscenes a lot more, with the illusion of depth and details like plumes of smoke or ash really bringing the game to life. I could tell they truly considered how each aspect of the game would translate into this 3D mode. On top of having in-battle voice acting and dynamic music, it's clear they went all out to give Awakening the widest general appeal possible. The art direction is fantastic. And in addition to its presentation, its characters did just as much of the heavy lifting. This is easily one of the most likable casts in Fire Emblem. They all have huge personalities in one way or another that appear to be one-note character quirks, but become much more intriguing if you so choose to delve into their support conversations. A lot of them strike this careful balance of having serious, weighty, sometimes tragic backstories with nonsensical, goofy, lighthearted fun. No singular character in Awakening is all one or the other. They become multifaceted when viewing their interactions with the rest of your army. But that's only if you choose to view their interactions with the rest of your army. There were a ton of characters in this game I forgot about over time and didn't really pay any attention to due to the fact I never wanted to use them. After this replay, however, I've gained a newfound love for a good handful of new characters and plenty of old favorites. Back in the day, characters like Gaius, Tharja, and Owain were always mainstays on my team, either for their hilarious interactions and quips or attractive character designs. But now I find myself appreciating characters like Virion, Libra, and Noe. Characters who all harbor feelings of guilt or animosity towards their lives, but choose to mask it in different ways. Libra especially surprised me, as I assumed his entire character would be stereotypically priest-like, talking about faith and believing in the goodness in people and whatnot. But I was surprised to learn he adopted his faith due to being raised in an abusive environment, and has since used it to keep those memories in the recesses of his heart. From then on, it recontextualized every support I read involving him, seeing how his empathy isn't born from his occupation, but rather from genuine experience he doesn't want anyone else to go through. I also really grew to love Chrom and the Khans, and I was surprised I wasn't big on them before. While Chrom might appear generic on the surface, he was one of the most dynamic lords I've experienced in a Fire Emblem game. He truly personifies the themes of Awakening, being this extremely trusting, open-minded man who actively listens to those around him. A trait I believe is one of the pillars of being a successfully loved leader. And by being so down to earth can end up coming off as awkward to those who expect him to be a pompous noble. He's truly a man of the people, never so arrogant to think his way of leading is the only way. The story constantly has him convening with multiple parties before deciding on a course of action. Very rarely does he act on emotion alone. From the outset, he understands his strength is intrinsically linked to those that follow him, and he has no issues relying on others if a problem is larger than himself. It's gonna sound corny as hell, but the guy genuinely loves and respects his friends. You gotta love him. The two Khans, Basilio and Flavia, were also major standouts, mostly for the stellar representation they have for people of color in Fire Emblem. The two are effortlessly cool, humorous, and charismatic, without their race being the focal point of their personalities. Everyone respects these two, and for a lot of the game, help our party out of pinches or offer sage advice on how to proceed in the war. They're amazing characters that just so happen to be melanated, and I love that. And while there have been non-white characters in the past and even more succeeding this game, I feel as if these two really raise the bar for how well they can be implemented into a Fire Emblem game. not to mention their designs being some of the most gorgeous and badass to look at. Yusuke Kozaki is still my favorite artist when it comes to game art direction, and I would love to see him return for another mainline title. This playthrough reminded me why I loved Awakening so much in the first place. It just oozed with style and personality. The characters were beautiful, the music addicting, and I loved to read through almost every support conversation. However, these rose-tinted glasses can only peer through the surface of the game. When I decided to play Awakening again, I knew for a fact I needed to approach it from a new perspective, playing a mode I never dared to touch in my long and storied Fire Emblem career. It's time to address the major issues I had with the game and what keeps me from being able to say I love it wholeheartedly. Awakening's game design and lunatic mode. Lunatic Awakening, and by extension Lunatic Plus, is infamous for being one of the most unbalanced, unfun, and unfair difficulties in Fire Emblem. After playing through numerous Fire Emblem games on Lunatic and Maddening modes, including the oft-described hardest game, Thracia 776, I did come to realize difficulty has always been a bit overstated by the fans. Lots of these games give you ample tools and flexibility when handling their campaigns, and so I imagined Lunatic wouldn't be nearly as bad as initially expected. In some ways I was correct, but in many others it was much worse than I thought. I'll start by outlining what the Lunatic difficulties did right. Firstly, it does actually require you to engage with its systems. The dual system and pair-up mechanic was first introduced in Awakening, where you can have units support each other in battle just by standing next to one another or pairing up. The lead unit would be the one engaging in combat, while their partner would grant them various bonuses depending on their class, stats, and support rank. Occasionally, the support unit could assist in combat by following up with their own attack or defending the lead from any damage taken. It's important to note the follow-up attacks are not able to utilize special skills like Luna or Astra, but can perform critical hits. In addition, all of these actions are completely up to chance. Now, you can increase the chances of dual strikes and guards happening if you increase the support rank between units. And the higher the support, the more likely every combat swings in your favor. This is the crowning jewel of Awakening that has you focus on the relationships of your army in addition to their combative prowess. On hard mode and below, the pair-up mechanic feels like more of a win more button, since on average, the strength of a single unit will be more than enough to handle 10 or more enemies. On Lunatic, however, I did have to actively think about which units would get paired up with which. I thought about which supports they could unlock, which classes would benefit the other the most stat-wise, if I should reclass anyone to better fit a duo. If they granted movement on pair-up, how would that change the way I approach the map? If they were units of the opposite sex, should I let them reach S support? Which skills would their children inherit? Could I even handle their child's paralog at the moment? It wasn't just a matter of sticking two strong units together. Pairing up is literally limiting the amount of moves you can make per turn, so each decision had weight to it. Especially so since enemies on Lunatic are leagues stronger than your army. To make up for the difference in statistics, you have to utilize pair-up. It's non-negotiable. I thought it was really cool to have pair-up be a thoughtful mechanic instead of just being a way to solo maps with ease. It was also smart of them to include Lunatic mode bonuses, similar to the hard mode bonuses of the GBA games. From Chapter 10 onwards, every unit besides Olivia and the second gen units gain at least 1 point in their key stats, and the later you join, the higher the increase. With this addition, it really helped to give my army a much needed power boost whenever I felt like I was lagging behind. However, that's where I'll have to end my praise of Lunatic. Awakening really starts to crack under its own weight on these higher difficulties. I did just finish talking about loving pair up, but the major problem with that mechanic is the fact that it is random. You can never count on dual strikes. You can never count on dual guards. Sometimes they'll kill an enemy unexpectedly and open your lead unit to more attacks. Sometimes they'll miss a key attack and end up getting someone else killed. While you can utilize pair up for the statistical bonus, the second portion of the mechanic, the strikes and the guards, are completely out of your control, and it can be infuriating sometimes. For the very first time I played Awakening, I found it extremely difficult. Often losing units due to forgetting how the weapon triangle worked, miscalculating the amount of damage I would take on enemy phase, ambush spawns, or being plain unlucky. A lot of the time I would think, if a map was difficult, I just needed to grind more, skew the numbers in my favor, and approach it with a stronger team. And the game rewarded that line of thinking by giving me ample risen on the world map to fight and random shops that could grant powerful weapons. Lunatic exists in that very same game, but is trying to erase the playstyle that supports it. Your early units do not receive any stat bonuses compared to the later recruits, while enemies are exceedingly powerful. It is not uncommon for a unit to get one-rounded on their joining chapter, making you rely on pair-up to even have them stand safely on the map. For a good portion of the game, Frederick is the only one capable of multiple rounds of combat, which is imperative since essentially every map has the route objective. And to top it off, Awakening loves to throw every enemy at you from turn 1. When your units start with stats like this, and enemies look like that, what choice do you have but to bench anyone that isn't a pre-promote? Awakening characters sport the highest growths in the series, enabling you to snowball your army if you give them just a little extra experience through things like the Risen battles or paralogs. But Lunatic actively disparages grinding by having those same battles with undefeatable enemies, which compounds into an even larger issue if those random shops appear on the same tile as them. It doesn't quite make sense. The best way to play Lunatic is to decide from the outset which units you want to build and funnel all the experience into them to even have a fighting chance. Spreading out experience amongst more than 3 or 4 members of your army is actively weakening it. It's strangely restrictive. On top of having gigantic open maps littered with enemies, frequent ambush spawns, little to no terrain, and even worse, randomized enemy exclusive skills on Lunatic Plus, Awakening isn't about how fast you can win, it's about how long you can survive. This is why I distanced Awakening from other Fire Emblem games over time. It relies on its RPG aspects much more than its tactical roots. RPGs reward exploration and strengthening your characters to face challenges, something inherent in the design of the world map. If a boss is too tough, just a bit of grinding to get a specific skill or finding a specific item will completely flip the dynamic of the fight. It's about stats and player preparedness. Tactical games are about resource management and the ability to navigate a map successfully. Terrain, enemy positioning, considering the objective and the responsibilities of each unit to fulfill that objective. Lunatic Awakening is attempting to become the latter when the entire game is rooted in the former. It's this strange disconnect between these identities that lands the difficulties into extreme camps. Normal and hard mode on Awakening aren't as engaging because they're much too simple to steamroll. Lunatic and Lunatic Plus mode on Awakening aren't as fun because they restrict you from becoming creative with your units and rewarding one type of playstyle. An easy fix for making Lunatic more engaging would be an increase to the base stats of early game units to prevent being reliant on one super unit, and keeping those enemy exclusive skills but only on select enemies throughout each map. The randomness was just unneeded. It would be disingenuous to say I didn't have any enjoyment at all with the Lunatic modes of Awakening. Overcoming these ridiculously overpowered enemies, and being able to roll credits on a final boss with cap stats, having multiple brushes with death be avoided through lucky dual guards and strikes, there was a certain amount of exhilaration in this. If I were to ever play Awakening again, it would be hard to play anything below Lunatic now that I know that it isn't some impossible difficulty. And I could see this through how others approach this game. There's a surprisingly tight community of Lunatic Awakening enjoyers. But the amount of times I groaned upon viewing a map, dejectedly reset due to an enemy having a skill that would cause an instant loss, the balance of Awakening is just not catered for me. Does it make it any less of a Fire Emblem game because of that? Yes, but I can appreciate it for what it tried to be, and why it was the reason I started playing these games. The characters will always be a joy to experience, the music will always be pleasant to listen to, the fun Easter eggs and references to past games with these weird little weapons that have yet to make a return, maps that are ripped straight out of other games, and the return of older characters. The DLC was genuinely amazing, featuring characters from every era and giving them beautiful, updated art to really bask in the nostalgia. You can have a personalized army from all of your favorite games, contemporary characters interacting with legends of old. It was the Fire Emblem heroes before heroes. In a way, Awakening can become more rewarding to play the more games you finished in the series. It's a bit scary to think this could have been the last Fire Emblem game had it not sold well, but regardless of what one might think of it, it's undeniable to see Awakening has genuine love for its history. I don't think it'll ever be my first choice when it comes to playing Fire Emblem, but in the end, I will always remember it for being my personal Fire Emblem Awakening.
Welcome back. It's over now.